Veronica, you've worked under three different administrations, so you've seen from the inside what the immigration system looks like. What's the difference that you've seen as a prosecutor, a former ICE prosecutor under the Trump administration versus under some of the Democratic presidential administrations that you've worked under?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I think what some people take for granted is, oh, there's these criminals, oh, there's these child abusers, oh, there's these sex traffickers. We have to get them now. And that has always been a constant in immigration. There's always been a priority for people who have violated criminal laws, who are dangers to the public. That has always been a constant, no matter if it was Obama, Biden, Obama at one point had the name deporter in chief because he had removed the most criminal non-citizens. So what's different about this environment is that there's a one size fits all type of immigration. Trump is using a cannon to kill a mouse, if you will. He is using the same force of laws to go after dangerous people, and he's using that against children. He's using that against families. People have been in the US for more than 10 years. I've seen so many people come to my office and say, I came into the United States in the 80s. I came in the 90s. I have just been working. My whole life is here. Am I safe? And that is the difference we're seeing now, that to this administration, just by being here, that is a crime that's going to have severe penalties.
Well, help us understand what the community of folks that you serve, how are they feeling in this moment when they hear about these raids that have taken place in places like Chicago, and now this planned raid by ICE on the Los Angeles community?
I think that what this administration is doing is creating a lot of fear so that people, non-citizens, whatever their status is, they throw their hands up and they say it's better to just go home. We see the reports on their Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter of non-citizens in handcuffs. And a lot of them are people who just overstayed their visas, people who are trying to work. And so when we hear these raids happening, people are afraid of being detained. Detention centers are not pleasant situations. People are placed into solitary confinement. They don't have enough to eat. The conditions are very cold. It's even difficult for them to seek medical attention. And so publicizing those difficulties, a lot of people are in fear that if they are arrested, how long will they be detained? Can they be released? Can they proceed with a immigration court proceeding outside of the detention center? And so a lot of the people that are coming into my office and when I do talks at community centers, churches, they're all scared. Am I someone who the government is looking for? And that is a very difficult question to answer right now because Trump and the administration has said they are focusing on criminal non-citizens. They are focusing on people who have an order of deportation already and they've overstayed that. But what they're showing, what we're seeing on the ground is a different story, especially because memos like the sensitive location memo was rescinded, where people were not, officers were not allowed to go into schools or churches or hospitals because there was this understanding that people in our communities need a place to worship, right? They should have that right. They need the ability to seek medical assistance if they're sick. They need to know that they can call 911 or report a crime if something happens against them. And all of those things have been taken away. So this administration has just been instilling a lot of fear, and that's what I am seeing with our clients.
So, Veronica, what legal rights does someone have that doesn't fall into one of those categories? Like, I have not committed a crime. The person is not a criminal. They don't have an order of deportation, but yet they get swept up in one of these raids. I have a friend who runs a nonprofit, and she said she did a YouTube video, and I talked to other friends about this situation where someone has a prior criminal record, and they were lured out of their home and then arrested, detained. So if you're not someone who has, an active felony or warrant against you, do you have any legal rights?
Yeah, and so that is common. So people, non-citizens, even if they committed a crime, everyone still has the same right. Number one, immigration cannot just go into your home without a judicial warrant. More than 90% of the cases, I would say, immigration does not have a judicial warrant signed by a judge. So they're relying on two things. They're relying on the person to give them consent to open the door and say, yes, please come in. And they can get that consent by lying to people. And I don't think people understand that. They can say, hey, there's a package for you waiting outside. Can you open the door? Or, hey, I saw someone just hit your car. Is it your car? You should come out. Or we're investigating a crime. Can you, we just want some details. And so that's how they lure people to open the door. And then once the doors open, now you cross that threshold. They can either come inside, even though you don't specifically say it, or they arrest you once you cross the threshold of the door. And so knowing that if someone knocks on the door and you're not expecting anybody, do not answer. I'm telling my clients, pretend you're not even home, because once you start engaging, that's a slippery slope and we don't know where it's going to end. If they have a judicial warrant, they're going to come in anyway. Whether you open the door or not, they're already allowed to do that. So there's no need to engage. When you're out in the public, your rights are a little different there because you can be approached, but immigration needs to have reasonable suspicion to actually stop you, suspicion that you're violating an immigration law. And so they can't determine that based on the way you look, because you're speaking a different language. And so just understanding that in these times, remaining silent is your best friend.
A lot of undocumented workers are trying their best to demonstrate that they should be allowed to stay in this country. They pay taxes, they volunteer when there's a disaster like the fires. Is there a legal process that exists today that would allow someone who either came here illegally to become legal, or if someone came here legally and overstayed their visa and now they're technically illegal, is there any process to change their status from illegal to legal?
So that is a really great point. And I think that's one of the misconceptions. A lot of people say, right, the argument against this is you wait online. I did things the right way. But for many people who are here, who want to come here seeking asylum, there really is no quote unquote line or right way to do things. The immigration system has been built on 1800, 1900 type of thinking, and it's designed to exclude, not include. And so unless someone already has an immediate family member here, like a parent, a spouse, and sometimes children, I'm going to put aside for now, because there's this argument that, people come here to just have children and then they use their children to get status. That's not exactly true. Parents who have crossed through the border without a visa are actually not eligible to become a lawful permanent resident based on their children, even if they're US citizens. And they definitely are not able to do that when their children are minors. So the whole family is vulnerable to a deportation order at that point. And so the options for going through a legal process, it is very limited. There's humanitarian purposes, which includes asylum, which Trump has really stripped down to like razor thin bones. And then there's family based, where you have to have a qualifying relative.
Well, let me ask you this, Veronica. If you come here without legal status and you have a family member here, is there any way that that family member can quote unquote vouch for you to help you get legal status?
It's essentially boiled down to just having a spouse. If you come here and you have someone who you're married to or a parent, they can do that process for you, but you do have to leave the United States, because you can't do that process within the United States if you entered without a visa.
So if you came here without a visa and you meet someone and you're going to marry that person, that you have to go back to your country of origin to get work on coming legally with a visa to marry your spouse or your future spouse.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to clear that up, because I think, as you said, a lot of people believe that there is some legal process by which someone who came here without a visa can then get a visa once they're here, or that if you've overstayed your visa, that somehow you can overcome that. And you're saying there are very limited circumstances in which that would even happen.
Right. And I think another misconception, a big one, is that seeking asylum is not a lawful pathway. And that is just not true, because the only way to seek asylum is if you make it to the US, if you step foot on US soil. That is the only way to request asylum. There's no other way to do it. And so there was a process, there is a process for that. And that has been really, a lot of the rights and the procedures for that have been taken away.